English.
Hi, my name is Jenny, and I want to tell you about my journey learning English. I always dreamed of speaking English fluently, but living in my small town made it difficult to practice. I studied English in school, but I could only read and write a little. Speaking was the hardest part for me. One day, I decided to take a short trip to visit my cousin. On the train, I sat next to two friendly-looking women who were speaking English. I felt nervous, but I really wanted to try talking to them. With a racing heart, I said, "Hello," and smiled. They smiled back warmly and started chatting with me. I only understood some of their words, but they spoke slowly when they realized I was learning English. They asked me simple questions about where I was from and what I was doing. I answered in basic English, using short sentences and sometimes pointing at things when I didn't know the words. The women were so kind and patient with me. When one of them offered me a cookie, saying, "Would you like one?" I understood perfectly. It was the first time I had a real conversation in English, and even though I made mistakes, they understood me. This made me feel so happy and confident. Before we reached our stop, they gave me their email addresses and invited me to visit them in England. That day on the train changed everything for me. I realized that learning English wasn't just about studying books, it was about connecting with people. I knew then that I wanted to do more than just study English in my hometown. I wanted to go where I could use English every day, where I could meet people from all over the world, and where I could finally become fluent. After my experience on the train, I couldn't stop thinking about learning English in England. I saved money for 6 months, and finally my dream came true. I moved to London. The city was huge and exciting, with people speaking English everywhere. At first, it felt overwhelming, but I reminded myself that this was exactly what I wanted. I searched online and found a language school near my new apartment. When I visited for the first time, I immediately liked the friendly atmosphere. The staff spoke clearly and helped me understand everything about the courses. I decided to join their intensive English program, starting the very next week. On my first day, I met my teacher, Sarah. She was different from any English teacher I'd had before. Instead of making us memorize grammar rules or do endless written exercises, she got us talking from the very first minute. She said, "The best way to learn a language is to use it. Don't worry about making mistakes, they're part of learning." Every morning, Sarah started the class with what she called chat time. We sat in a circle and talked about our days, our families, or anything interesting that happened to us. At first, I felt shy and worried about my mistakes. But Sarah always encouraged us. She said, making mistakes meant we were trying, and trying meant we were learning. What I loved most was how Sarah made everything practical. When we learned new words, we didn't just write them down, we used them in conversations right away. We played games, did role plays, and even went on small field trips around London. During these activities, we had to speak English to complete different tasks, like asking for directions or ordering food. One day, Sarah taught us something that really changed how I thought about learning English. She said, "Think of English as a tool, not a subject. You don't study a hammer, you use it to build things. It's the same with English. Use it to build connections, share ideas, and express yourself." This made so much sense to me, and from that day on, I stopped being afraid of speaking English. My classmates came from all over the world: Japan, Brazil, Spain, and many other countries. Since English was our only common language, we had to use it all the time, even during breaks. This created a supportive environment where we all helped each other learn and improve. One morning, Sarah introduced us to what she called the magic of reading. She explained that reading in English was like having a personal teacher available 24 hours a day. This caught my attention immediately, especially when she said that just 30 minutes of daily reading could double our learning speed. Sarah showed us her method for choosing books. She said we should start with simple stories that interest us, not complicated novels that might discourage us. She recommended children's books, saying there was no shame in starting with easier texts. What matters is enjoying what we read and understanding most of it. I decided to start with a simple mystery story. Sarah taught us to use dictionaries effectively. She said we shouldn't look up every unknown word, just the ones that appear multiple times or seem important to the story. This way, reading stays enjoyable and doesn't become a tedious task. I followed her advice and started reading for 30 minutes before bed each night. At first, it was challenging. I had to look up many words, but I stuck to the method. After a few weeks, I noticed something amazing. I was understanding more without using the dictionary. The words I learned through reading started appearing in my conversations naturally. Sarah explained that reading helps us learn grammar without studying rules. When we read, our brains naturally pick up patterns in how sentences are formed. I noticed this happening to me. I started forming better sentences without thinking about grammar rules. The more I read, the more natural English felt. We also learned about reading aloud. Sarah said, "This helps with pronunciation and speaking confidence." She encouraged us to read dialogue parts as if we were actors, putting emotion into the words. This was fun and helped me remember new vocabulary better. The most important lesson was to be patient. Sarah told us that learning through reading is like watching a plant grow. You might not see progress every day, but over time, the growth is remarkable. She was right. After 3 months of regular reading, my vocabulary had grown significantly, and I felt more confident expressing myself. I discovered that reading opened up a whole new world of English learning. Through books, I learned not just words and grammar, but also how native speakers express their thoughts and feelings. The best part was that I could practice anywhere, anytime, and at my own pace. Reading became my favorite way to learn English, and I started carrying a book with me everywhere I went. After 3 months of studying at the language school, I felt ready to challenge myself further. I wanted to practice English outside the classroom in real situations. My teacher always said that real-world practice was essential for improving language skills, so I decided to look for a part-time job. I visited the local job center and browsed through their listings. Most positions required advanced English skills, but I found an advertisement for a cafe looking for a waitress. The owner, Mrs. Thompson, was very kind during the interview. She said my English level was good enough to start, and she liked my enthusiasm to learn. My first day at the cafe was both exciting and nerve-wracking. I had to take orders, answer questions about the menu, and chat with customers. At first, I made many mistakes. Sometimes I couldn't understand what customers were saying, especially when they spoke quickly or used unfamiliar expressions. But the regular customers were patient and often helped me learn new words. I remember one elderly gentleman who came in every morning for his coffee and scone. He would teach me a new English phrase each day. When I got confused between take away and take out, he explained that both mean the same thing, just British versus American English. These little lessons helped me understand the practical differences in how English is used. Working at the cafe exposed me to different accents and speaking styles. Some customers spoke with strong London accents, while others were tourists from various English-speaking countries. This variety helped train my ear to understand different ways of speaking English. The most challenging part was handling busy periods when the cafe was full. I had to take multiple orders quickly and accurately. But this pressure actually helped me think and respond in English without translating in my head first. After a few weeks, I found myself automatically saying things like, "Would you like milk with that?" or "Here's your change," without having to think about the words. My confidence grew with each shift. I started making small talk with customers about the weather, their days, or current events. These conversations were perfect practice because they were short but meaningful. Even when I made mistakes, customers appreciated my efforts to communicate. After 2 months at the cafe, I noticed a significant improvement in my speaking abilities. Everyday phrases became natural, and I could handle most situations without hesitation. Mrs. Thompson even commented on how much progress I had made. This real-world experience taught me that using English in daily life was just as important as studying in the classroom. One day in class, Minji, a student from South Korea, was struggling with pronunciation. She could write and read English well, but speaking clearly was a challenge. When she raised her hand to ask for help, our teacher introduced us to something called the shadowing technique. The technique seemed simple, but was incredibly effective. First, we would listen to a native English speaker talking, either from a podcast or video. Then, we would repeat what they said, trying to match their speed, rhythm, and intonation exactly like being their shadow. The key was to speak almost at the same time as them, with just a split-second delay. Minji and I decided to practice together after class. We started with short, simple recordings and gradually moved to longer, more complex ones. We found that news broadcasts were particularly helpful because the presenters spoke clearly and at a consistent pace. Sometimes we would record ourselves and compare our pronunciation to the original speaker. Our teacher explained that shadowing helps train our mouths to make unfamiliar sounds naturally. She showed us how English speakers use their lips, tongue, and throat differently from Korean or my native language. For example, Minji struggled with the R and L blangs, while I had trouble with. Through shadowing, we learned to feel these differences in our mouths. We practiced specific sound pairs that many students find difficult: ship and sheep, fool and full, bet and bat. The teacher encouraged us to exaggerate the movements of our mouths at first, then gradually make them more natural. She also taught us about word stress and how English speakers emphasize certain syllables to create rhythm. The most interesting part was learning about linking words in English speech. Native speakers often connect words, making them sound like one continuous flow rather than separate units. Through shadowing, we could hear and practice these connections, making our English sound more natural and less robotic. Soon, other students started joining our shadowing practice sessions. We turned it into a daily routine, spending 15 minutes before class listening and repeating together. It became almost like a choir practice, but instead of singing, we were learning to speak English more clearly. After a month in London, I noticed a flyer on the school's bulletin board advertising football team tryouts. I had always enjoyed playing football back home, but I never thought about it as a way to practice English. The flyer mentioned that students from all levels were welcome, so I decided to give it a try. On my first day at practice, I met players from Brazil, Spain, Japan, and Germany. We all had different levels of English, but our shared love for football created an instant connection. Our coach, Sarah, made sure we communicated in English during practice, teaching us sport-specific vocabulary like pass, shoot, and defend. During water breaks, we would chat about our home countries and share stories about our experiences in London. Maria from Spain taught me football slang she had learned from watching Premier League matches. Yuki from Japan and I would practice counting scores and announcing plays, turning every practice into an English learning opportunity. The best part was that nobody worried about making mistakes. When Thomas from Germany called a corner kick a corner point, we all laughed together, and he learned the correct term naturally. This relaxed atmosphere made speaking English feel less intimidating than in the classroom. We started meeting up before practices to grab coffee and talk about game strategies. These casual conversations helped me learn everyday expressions and idioms I wouldn't find in textbooks. I learned phrases like kick off, which I discovered could mean both starting a football match and beginning something new. Our team even organized friendly matches with other language schools in London. These games were exciting not just for the competition, but because they gave us chances to meet even more international students. After matches, both teams would often go to a local cafe, where conversations would flow freely in English about everything from football tactics to our favorite places in London. The football team became more than just a sports activity. It turned into a community where we could practice English without feeling self-conscious. Whether we were planning plays on the field or celebrating a victory, we were constantly improving our language skills without even realizing it. One day, a new student named Elizabeth joined our English class. She was from Italy, and I was amazed by how fluently she spoke English. During our lunch break, I couldn't help but ask her about her secret to speaking so naturally. Her answer surprised me. She called it the think aloud technique. Elizabeth explained that instead of trying to translate everything in her head from Italian to English, she had trained herself to think directly in English. She started with simple things, like describing what she was doing throughout the day. "When I make breakfast," she said, "I tell myself I'm pouring milk into my cereal. I'm adding sugar to my coffee." I was fascinated by this approach. Elizabeth told me she even talked to herself while walking down the street, describing what she saw: the red bus passing by, the couple holding hands, the dog chasing a ball in the park. At first, she did this quietly to avoid strange looks from others, but eventually it became natural, like having a constant conversation with herself in English. That evening, I decided to try Elizabeth's technique. While cooking dinner, I started describing my actions out loud. "I'm chopping onions. Now I'm heating the oil in the pan." It felt strange at first, and I made many mistakes, but I kept going. When I couldn't find the right words, I used my phone to look them up, adding new vocabulary to my growing collection. The next morning, I continued the practice during my commute to school. Instead of listening to music, I described the journey in my head. "I'm walking down the stairs to the underground. The train is arriving. It's very crowded today." I noticed that the more I practiced, the faster the English words came to mind. Elizabeth also shared another tip. She would have imaginary conversations in English. While in the shower or doing household chores, she would pretend to be in different situations, ordering food at a restaurant, having a job interview, or giving directions to a tourist. I started doing the same, and it helped me prepare for real-life situations. The most surprising benefit was that I began dreaming in English. The first time it happened, I woke up amazed. It was a simple dream about buying groceries, but everyone, including me, was speaking English. That's when I realized the think aloud technique was working. English was becoming a natural part of my thought process. Looking back on my journey in London, I can hardly believe how far I've come. When I first arrived, I was nervous about ordering coffee or asking for directions. Now, I can have deep conversations about literature, joke with customers at the cafe, and even dream in English. The transformation hasn't just been about language, it's changed how I see myself and the world around me. For anyone starting their English learning journey, I want to share what I've learned. The most important thing is to make English a part of your daily life. Commit to at least 40 minutes every day of active English practice. This doesn't mean sitting with textbooks and memorizing grammar rules. Instead, read books you enjoy. Listen to podcasts about topics that interest you. And most importantly, speak as much as possible. The shadowing technique I learned in class has been invaluable for improving pronunciation. Find a YouTube video, podcast, or movie scene you like, and practice speaking along with native speakers. Don't worry about getting every word perfect. Focus on the rhythm and flow of the language. Thinking aloud in English has completely changed how I learn. Start with simple descriptions of what you're doing or seeing. Even if you make mistakes, keep going. Every word you speak builds your confidence and helps your brain think in English naturally. Remember that real progress comes from using English in real situations. Join a sports team, find a part-time job, or start a conversation with someone at a cafe. These practical experiences are worth more than any textbook exercise. Most importantly, don't be afraid of making mistakes. Every error is a step toward fluency. The two women I met on the train that first day taught me something valuable. Native English speakers appreciate when you try to communicate, even if your English isn't perfect. Today, London feels like home, and English feels like a second skin. This journey has shown me that with dedication, the right techniques, and a willingness to step outside your comfort zone, anyone can achieve their language learning goals. The key is to keep going, stay motivated, and remember that every small step takes you closer to fluency. Thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to LK English for more awesome content, and share this video with your friends so they can learn too. See you in the next lesson. Keep improving your English and have a great day.